Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human researched and written material.
Glad to be diving into this one today.
Yeah, and I have to say, if I just say the word love to you right now, you probably have a very specific, immediate physiological reaction to it.
You probably picture a warm blanket or, a feeling that's completely boundaryless.
Exactly. Endlessly accommodating, universally affirming. But today, we are opening this ancient letter that takes that warm blanket, folds it up, and honestly just sets it on fire.
It really is a startling text. I mean, we are so conditioned today to view affection as this ultimate universal solvent.
It just washes away all distinctions, right?
Yeah, all distinctions, all rules, all fiction. And then you encounter this writer who completely shatters our modern, highly sentimentalized view of what care is actually supposed to look like.
I'm genuinely a bit nervous to tackle this one, to be honest, because the landscape of love we're looking at today is just full of incredibly sharp edges.
It definitely is.
We are taking a deep dive into the biblical book of 2 John. And honestly, calling it a book feels like a massive stretch for our modern ears.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly brief.
Yeah, barely over a dozen sentences long.
Yeah.
Just 13 verses in total.
But the density of those 13 verses is just staggering. I mean, it's this tiny, ancient letter likely carried in someone's leather pouch across the Roman Empire.
Right.
But it wrestles with an incredibly modern problem.
Which is really how to balance unconditional love with strict, unyielding boundaries against, toxic ideologies.
Exactly.
And to help us navigate this, for you listening, we have a really fantastic stack of sources on the table today. We're going to be looking at the literal text of 2 John.
Specifically using the World English Bible translation for that.
Yeah, just so we have a really clear, accessible baseline. But we're not just, reading the text in a vacuum. We're bringing in 2 absolute titans of biblical scholarship to help us decode it.
Which is essential for a text this dense.
Right. So we have Matthew Henry's complete commentary on the Bible, written way back in 1706, and then Albert Barnes' notes on the whole Bible from 1870.
It is a brilliant combination of minds. I mean, both Henry and Barnes possess this incredible talent for taking very dense ancient Greek concepts.
Concepts that can easily feel like locked away in some ivory tower.
Exactly. And they translate them into practical human experience. They aren't satisfied with merely asking, well, what does the Greek syntax mean?
Right. They want to know how it changes things.
Yeah, they demand to know, how does this actually alter the way a human being lives on a Tuesday morning?
And that is our mission for you today. We want to be your guides through this material, extracting the practical wisdom, the moral insight, and really the life application from these 13 sentences.
Because this central tension, setting a boundary against toxicity without losing your own capacity to love, is something every single person listening right now has to deal with.
Oh, totally. Whether it's a brutal dynamic in your extended family, navigating a hostile workplace, or just honestly trying to survive the absolute war zone of the internet.
Yeah, the internet is exactly where this applies. This ancient text is shockingly relevant there.
It truly is. But before we can even begin to understand the incredibly heavy, almost martial boundaries this letter eventually sets up,
we have to look at the emotional bedrock of the relationship first.
Right. We have to start with a deeply affectionate connection between the person sending this letter and the person receiving it.
Because the human context changes the entire tone of those boundaries.
Let's start with the sender. In the very first verse, he doesn't even use his name. He just calls himself the elder.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah, and I have to admit, that sounds a bit cryptic to me. If I get an anonymous letter in the mail signed the elder, I'm probably calling the police.
I mean, fair enough.
So why the mystery?
Well, it wasn't a mystery to the recipient, and it really isn't much of a mystery to our scholars either. Both Matthew Henry and Albert Barnes point out that the style, the overwhelming themes of truth and love,
which are everywhere in this letter.
Right, and the unbroken historical tradition of the early church all point to this being the Apostle John.
Okay, but let me stop you there. If he's the Apostle John, arguably one of the most famous and authoritative figures in the entire early Christian movement.
Yes.
Why not lead with that? Why not say, John, apostle of Jesus Christ, writing to you with supreme authority? Why just the elder?
That is exactly the point. You have to picture John at this specific moment in history.
Okay.
This is not the young, fiery, ambitious fisherman we read about in the gospel narratives. This is John in his extreme old age.
Like, how old are we talking?
He is likely living in or around Ephesus near the end of the 1st century, so he's probably in his 90s.
Wow.
And think about what this man has lived through. He outlived Peter. He outlived Paul. He outlived James.
All of them.
Yeah, he has seen the entire original core of his friends martyred. He watched the Roman Empire burn Jerusalem to the ground in 70 AD.
Oh, wow.
He survived political exile on the penal colony of Patmos.
The psychological weight of that is just hard to even fathom. He is literally the last man standing.
Precisely. And Matthew Henry captures the essence of this beautifully. Henry writes, quote, "An old disciple is honorable. An old apostle and leader of disciples is more so."
That's a great quote.
He talks about how this writer has, quote, "tasted much of heaven and is much nearer to it now than when he first believed."
So the title, the elder, isn't like a demotion.
Not at all. It is an elevation. It shifts his authority from a positional title to a deeply relational, hard-won reverence.
That paints such a vivid picture. So he's in his 90s, his perspective is entirely distilled.
Completely.
When a man who has lived through that much trauma, that much joy, and has tasted much of heaven takes the physical effort to write you a 13-verse letter, he isn't wasting ink on fluff.
No, the fluff is entirely gone. You are getting the absolute, unvarnished core of what matters.
And that brings us to the recipient, who is equally fascinating. He addresses this letter to the elect lady and her children.
Which sparks a huge debate.
Right. Okay, so I have a major issue with this. The elect lady, let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
This sounds exactly like a spy code. I mean, we're talking about the 1st century. The Roman Empire is occasionally incredibly hostile to this new religious movement.
Right, the persecutions were very real.
So isn't elect lady just a clever metaphor? Like he is writing to an underground local church and calling them a lady, so that if a Roman soldier intercepts the courier, they just think it's a letter to some random woman.
It's a very common assumption, and honestly, a debate that has raged in academic circles for centuries. Some very smart people argue exactly what you just said.
Okay, so what do our sources say?
We need to look at how Barnes handles this. Albert Barnes dives deep into the Greek text here. The Greek word used for lady is kyria.
Kyria.
Now, Barnes notes that kyria was sometimes used as a respectful title, equivalent to madam or lady, sure. But it was also a very common proper name in the Greco-Roman world.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Her name might have literally been Kyria.
So she is a literal flesh and blood person, not a metaphor.
Yes. Both Barnes and Henry treat her as a historical woman, and not just an average citizen either.
What was her status?
Henry describes her as a person of eminent quality, a noble Christian matron.
Oh, so she's wealthy.
Exactly. And Barnes points out a very telling detail. There is absolutely no mention of her husband in the text.
None at all.
None. Even though her children are mentioned prominently, and she seems to have total control over her household's affairs and resources.
Which implies she is a widow.
A widow of significant means and influence.
That's a big deal back then.
It is. In the Roman paterfamilias system, for a woman to be the absolute head of a prominent household, to be the one dictating who is hosted and who is funded, was a major deal.
She's a powerhouse.
She really is. She is someone who hosts traveling philosophers and ministers. She has real economic and social leverage in her city.
Matthew Henry makes a point that I found so striking about this. He calls this an economical epistle.
Right.
Meaning it's a letter written about the domestic economy, like the order of family.
Yeah.
And he says regarding the greeting that religion consecrates old forms and turns compliments into real expressions of life and love.
That's a profound insight from Henry. In the ancient world, letters usually began with a highly formalized boilerplate greeting.
Like what?
Well, you can dig up thousands of secular papyri from Egypt that start with "Greetings to you and your household, hoping you are in good health."
Oh, so it was just the ancient equivalent of "hope this email finds you well."
Exactly. Which we all know means absolutely nothing today. It's purely transactional.
Totally.
But John takes that empty, secular Greco-Roman form and injects it with massive, blood-earnest reality.
Right. When he says he loves her and her children in the truth, he isn't just being polite.
No, he is stating a profound theological reality about the bond they share.
And this bond immediately brings us to verse 4, which is where this ancient text suddenly reaches out and grabs the modern reader right by the collar.
This verse is so pastoral.
It is. John writes, "I rejoice greatly that I found of thy children walking in truth." Now, if you just skim that, it sounds like a nice grandparent-style compliment.
Like, hey, your kids are doing great, so proud of them.
Right. But Albert Barnes points out a grammatical detail in the original language that turns this into a heartbreakingly real scenario.
This is where textual scholarship becomes just profoundly pastoral. Barnes points out that in the Greek, the phrase used is ektun teknon.
Ektun teknon.
Literally translated, it means some of your children.
Some of.
Wow. Yeah. The way the participle is constructed implies that John found some of her children walking in the truth, which inherently, unavoidably means that not all of them were.
That completely changes the temperature of the verse.
It really does. Barnes specifically addresses this, doesn't he?
Yeah. He says that if every single one of her kids was perfectly aligned with her faith, John would have just written, "thy children."
But he purposefully writes, "some of thy children."
Right. And think about the crushing reality of that for this woman. Here's the elect lady. She is a noble, prominent, deeply faithful leader in her community.
She's doing everything right.
Exactly. She is wealthy enough to host the church in her home. She has the Apostle John, the last living disciple of Jesus, as a personal, intimate family friend.
The ultimate connection.
If anyone had the absolute perfect environment, the perfect resources, and the perfect connections to guarantee that her children would adopt her worldview, it was her.
And yet, even in her household, some of her children have chosen a different path. They have walked away.
I cannot emphasize enough how deeply this translates to the 21st century.
It's so relevant.
You talk to parents today, specifically parents who hold deep convictions,
Yeah.
who are incredibly intentional and loving. And if their adult children grow up and walk away from the family's core values, there is this immense, suffocating guilt.
Oh, absolutely. The immediate psychological assumption is, what did I do wrong?
Where did I fail?
Right. If I had just read the right books or sheltered them more or sheltered them less, they would have stayed.
It is an agonizing burden that modern parents carry, this illusion of total determinism.
We think if we input the right variables, we are guaranteed the output we want. But Barnes calls this verse a profound consolation for parents.
A consolation.
Yeah, he says that if this incredible woman had some children who were not walking in the truth, her lot was not unique. It removes that crushing burden.
Oh, that makes sense.
You can create the most beautiful, truth-filled environment possible, but you cannot make the final sovereign choice for another human soul.
And look at John's pastoral strategy here. He doesn't write a 13-verse letter shaming her for the kids who wandered off.
No, not at all.
He doesn't offer a 10-step program to fix them. He actively focuses his energy on rejoicing over the ones who are walking in truth.
Because whatever you feed grows. He commends the good to encourage them to persevere.
Matthew Henry has a really fascinating theory about the logistics of this, actually. He speculates on how John, living in Ephesus, even found out about these kids' behavior.
Yes, Henry suggests that her sons, coming from a wealthy, prominent family, likely traveled abroad to Ephesus on business.
Because Ephesus was huge, right?
Yeah, it was a massive commercial hub, a port city bustling with trade from all over the empire. They were likely managing the family estate or negotiating trade deals.
I love this historical speculation because Henry draws such a brilliant moral lesson from it. He points out that these young men carried their religion with them when they left the house.
Which is the true test of internalization.
Exactly. Think about it. When you are a young man in the first century, far away from your prominent, strict mother, in a wildly pluralistic, decadent city like Ephesus, with money in your pocket.
That is the ultimate test.
They didn't just act a certain way because mom was watching. When the structural supports of their home environment were completely removed, they were still walking in the truth.
Right. Is your worldview merely inherited compliance? Or is it personal conviction? John sees these young men operating in the cutthroat business world of Ephesus, acting with absolute integrity and love, and he is just thrilled.
His joy just overflows into this letter.
Okay, so the stage is beautifully set. We understand the aged apostle, the prominent, powerful widow, and the very real, messy dynamics of raising adult children.
Yes.
But the core of John's immense joy over these young men isn't just that they are good, decent people.
Right, it's specific.
That is specifically that they are walking in what he calls truth and love. And in the architecture of this letter, those two concepts are inseparable twins.
This brings us to the philosophical and theological crux of the entire letter. In verses 5 and 6, John is going to redefine love for his audience, and frankly, he's going to deeply challenge our modern definition of it.
He really is.
I was thinking about how to explain this, and I came up with an analogy. I really want to know if this tracks with the historical reality.
Let's hear it.
Today, in modern Western culture, we treat love like water.
Okay, water.
It is completely fluid. It takes the exact shape of whatever container you pour it into. If someone looks at you and says, "This is my truth, and this is what love means to me," society generally nods and accepts that.
Right.
Love is viewed as a subjective mood, an overwhelming rush of emotion, or just a sentiment of total affirmation. It has no internal structure.
Yes, very malleable.
But the elder in this letter doesn't treat love like water. He treats it like a compass.
A compass.
It's rigid. It has an internal mechanism, and it only points to true north.
That analogy tracks perfectly with the text, actually, and it highlights the friction between the ancient and modern mindsets.
So how does John explicitly define it?
Let's look at verse 6. John says, and this is love, that we walk after his commandments. Both Barnes and Henry spend a lot of time emphasizing this.
It's a huge claim.
In the biblical framework John is operating within, love is absolutely not a passing sentiment. It is not an emotion that washes over you and then fades.
So what is it?
It is an objective action characterized by strict obedience to divine truth.
Man, that is such a difficult concept for us to swallow today. I mean, we separate the head and the heart. We think rules and commandments are the opposite of love.
Exactly. But Henry argues that universal obedience is the proof of the sincerity of our virtues.
Wow.
To the ancient mind, and specifically to John, if you claim to love God or love your neighbor, but you actively ignore the objective commands of truth, your love is completely hollow. It's a counterfeit.
Barnes has this incredibly beautiful note on verse 2 regarding truth, too.
Oh, I love that note.
He says, the truth is not a passing stranger or a weary traveler finding lodging for a night. He says it takes up permanent abode in the heart.
That image is stunning.
It doesn't just visit you when you read an inspiring quote on Instagram. It moves in. It unpacks its bags.
It has come to us to make our hearts its permanent home, to use Barnes's exact phrasing.
Yes.
And here's the mechanism behind that. Because objective truth has made its home inside of you, it fundamentally alters how you express love to other people. The two become inextricably locked together.
You can't have one without the other.
Right. You cannot truly love someone while deceiving them or encouraging them to live in a lie. Conversely, you cannot claim to hold the truth if you are using it as a weapon without a deep sacrificial love for the person you are speaking to.
I'm stuck on something, though. If truth is this rigid compass, and love is defined as obeying strict commandments, doesn't that just lead to a really exhausting rule-based life?
It sounds heavy, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like constant pressure.
That is a brilliant question, and it is exactly why John includes the greeting he does in verse 3. It provides the atmosphere where this truth and love actually operate.
Oh, we skipped over that earlier.
Yes, but it's vital. John writes, "Grace, mercy, and peace will be with us, from God the Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of the Father, in truth and love."
And Matthew Henry dissects that salutation with, microscopic precision.
He does. Let's break those down, because they aren't just religious buzzwords to Henry.
Let's do it.
They are the sequential engine of the Christian life. First, Henry defines grace as divine favor and goodwill. It is the unmerited, unearned disposition of God toward humanity. It is the spring from which everything else flows. You don't earn the compass. It is handed to you as a gift.
Okay, but then he immediately adds mercy. If I already have grace, this unearned favor, why do I need mercy?
Because John is writing to real, flawed humans. Henry defines mercy as a free parting for sinful mortals.
Oh.
He notes something incredibly profound. Even those who are the most rich in grace, even the elect lady and her devout children, still have a desperate, ongoing need for continual forgiveness.
That makes so much sense. Grace puts you in the relationship, but mercy sustains it when you inevitably fail to perfectly walk in that rigid truth and love.
Precisely. It prevents the system from becoming a crushing legalism.
And what's the result of experiencing that ongoing grace and mercy?
The third word, peace. Henry calls this the tranquility of spirit and serenity of conscience.
Which we all want.
Oh, desperately. In the chaotic, anxiety-inducing world of the first century Roman Empire or, the 21st century digital age, true peace is a rare commodity.
Absolutely.
But Henry argues it is the natural byproduct of being reconciled. You are at peace.
And I noticed Henry points out that John specifically emphasizes who this comes from. He doesn't just say from God.
Right.
He says from the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of the Father. Henry notes that John uses this emphatic title because it is the absolute bedrock of the whole system.
Yes. And look at the very last phrase of that verse. All of that, the grace, the mercy, the peace, the presence of Christ, it only operates, it only exists in truth and love.
They are the banks of the river that the grace flows through.
Beautifully said.
So as a practical translation for you listening right now, I want to challenge you to reflect on your own operating system.
Always a good practice.
Does your working definition of love include a fierce allegiance to what is objectively true? Or is it merely sentimental?
Right.
Are you willing to tell someone you care about a deeply uncomfortable, hard truth because you love them too much to let them live a lie?
That's the hard part.
And on the flip side, are you willing to constrain your own desires and impulses because truth demands it?
If we zoom out for a comparative insight, we see this concept echoed in the deepest human wisdom traditions across the globe.
Really? Like where?
From ancient Stoic philosophers to classical Eastern thought, there is a universal recognition that true, enduring affection requires an alignment with moral reality.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, sentiment that is divorced from truth is ultimately destructive. It flatters the ego, but it doesn't build the soul. John is just distilling this universal human reality into its most absolute, acute theological form.
I completely agree, but that raises a massive question for me. Why is John hammering so relentlessly on this?
It does seem intense.
Yeah, why the sudden, intense focus on the rigidity of truth? He's an old man writing to a friend. Why is he treating this like a wartime briefing?
Because there is an active existential threat kicking at the front door of the elect lady's house.
And the tone of the letter violently shifts right here. We go from rejoicing over children and discussing grace to an absolute red alert warning.
It's a jolt.
Verse 7 says, "For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who don't confess that Jesus Christ came in the flesh. This is the deceiver and the antichrist."
The vocabulary is shocking. Deceiver, antichrist.
Yeah.
We need to deeply understand the historical and theological danger John is addressing because Barnes and Henry make it clear that this isn't a minor disagreement.
Right.
These deceivers aren't just people with slightly different opinions on secondary issues. They aren't debating the best style of music for the house church or arguing about dietary laws.
They are taking a sledgehammer to the load-bearing walls of the entire worldview.
Precisely. They are explicitly denying the Incarnation, the central claim that the divine God actually inhabited physical human flesh.
Okay.
In the late 1st century, this was the bleeding edge of a heresy that would later become known fully as Gnosticism.
I don't think I'm fully following.
Yeah.
Can you break down the mechanism there?
Sure.
Like, why would anyone care if God had a physical body or not? Why is that the hill John is willing to die on?
It comes down to how the ancient Greco-Roman world viewed reality. The Gnostics, heavily influenced by certain strains of Greek philosophy, believed in a strict dualism.
Dualism.
Yeah, they believed that spirit was pure, perfect, and good, but matter, physical stuff, dirt, wood, and specifically human flesh, was inherently corrupt, decaying, and evil.
So if flesh is inherently evil, the ultimate perfect God could never, ever contaminate himself by actually becoming a human being with a digestive system, sweat glands, and physical pain.
Exactly. To the Gnostic mind, the idea of the Incarnation was just disgusting, so they taught that Jesus only appeared to be human.
Oh, like a projection.
Yes, like a phantom, a pure spirit projecting a physical hologram. But Barnes and Henry point out why this completely destroys the entire framework of the faith.
How so?
If he didn't come in actual flesh, then he didn't bleed actual blood, he didn't die an actual death on a Roman cross, and he didn't experience an actual physical resurrection.
The entire mechanism of redemption falls apart. If he wasn't human, he can't represent humanity.
Right. Henry issues a stark warning here. He says that deceivers exist in every single age. They morph their tactics, but the goal is the same: to subvert the core truth.
And Henry points out the tragic domino effect here, too. By subverting faith in the truth, they inevitably destroy love.
Yes. If you destroy the truth about who God is, you obliterate the foundation for the kind of self-sacrificial love John just spent 6 verses defining.
And the stakes for this are terrifyingly high. Which brings us to verse 8, a verse that honestly serves as a massive obstacle to modern theological sensibilities.
It's a tough one.
John writes, "Watch yourselves that we don't lose the things which we have accomplished, but that we receive a full reward."
It is a profoundly sobering text.
I have to push back hard here, Because this challenges a very comfortable, very prevalent modern assumption
Let's unpack it.
that we lose not those things which we have wrought. Are you telling me we can actually lose our spiritual progress? I think a lot of people today, even within deep religious circles, have this idea of a perpetual upward trajectory. The idea is, once you're in the club, you're in. You punched your ticket to heaven, and the rest is just coasting.
It is a very comforting idea, but both Barnes and Henry completely dismantle that complacency right here. Let's look at Henry first.
Okay.
He is quite blunt. He points out that professors of religion, meaning those who publicly profess the faith, who look the part, can gain a fair reputation. They can acquire massive amounts of theological light. They can even experience deep emotional convictions.
Right.
And yet, if they yield to these deceivers, they can lose it all at the end. They can lose their pains, their labor, everything they have worked for over decades.
That is legitimately terrifying. It means you can spend 40 years building a spiritual house and watch it burn down in year 41 because you let a deception take root.
It is meant to be a wake-up call. But Barnes offers a slightly different, highly nuanced, and equally compelling angle. He focuses intensely on that phrase, a full reward.
It's a full reward.
Barnes suggests that John is talking to genuine believers here. But he warns that even for true believers, yielding to paralyzing error, tolerating this Gnostic deception, means the crown won in heaven could be less bright.
Less bright.
The reward could be less full.
So he's saying you might still make it, but you are diminishing your capacity for glory.
Yes. Barnes asks rhetorically, who can estimate the full reward of heaven? And who wouldn't want a crown where not a single gem is missing?
Wow.
If you let your guard down, if you compromise with ideological error now, you are actively forfeiting the depth of your ultimate joy. You are leaving jewels on the table.
Because the threat is so severe and the potential loss is so great, John issues that sharp command, watch yourselves.
And Barnes extracts a fascinating strategic principle from those two words. He calls it the citadel strategy.
It's one of the most practical pieces of advice in the entire commentary.
It really is. Barnes says that when an enemy invades a land, your very first duty is not to run out into the open field to fight them, regardless of how strong you think you are.
Okay, so what is it?
Your primary, absolute first duty is to look to the citadel of your own soul. You have to ensure that your own fortress is manned, provisioned, and secure.
I cannot think of a more vital practice for the modern era. Think about how we operate today.
Oh, it's the exact opposite.
Let's say you're lying in bed at 11:30 p.m., scrolling on your phone. You see a deeply toxic, deceptive, or enraging opinion on a social media thread.
We all know that feeling.
Our modern knee-jerk reaction is to instantly engage. We jump out of our mental bed, run out of the castle gates in our pajamas, and start swinging a sword in the comment section.
And Barnes is saying, via John's ancient wisdom, stop. Look to yourselves first. Are your own defenses actually secure?
Right. Is your own heart rooted deeply in the objective truth we talked about earlier, or are you just addicted to the dopamine hit of the conflict? Do you even know why you are fighting?
But wait, doesn't that just become an excuse for isolationism?
What do you mean?
Like, how do I know when my citadel is actually secure? I might just use that as an excuse to hide in the castle forever and never confront error.
That is the tension, isn't it?
Yeah, but Barnes isn't advocating for cowardice. He is advocating for tactical preparation. If your own inner life is a chaotic mess, if you aren't actively walking in truth and love in your private life, going out to fight cultural deceivers will only result in you being drawn away into their toxic methodology.
You become what you hate.
You don't engage the deceivers until your own faith is bulletproof. Secure the core first.
I love that. Okay, so let's say you have done the hard work. Your citadel is secure. You know it is true.
Right.
But what happens when the enemy actually walks up and knocks on the front door of your castle?
This brings us to what you called the hospitality friction point.
And I need to warn the listener. This is, without a doubt, the most controversial, uncomfortable, and fiercely countercultural part of this entire letter.
It is the text that makes modern readers, especially highly empathetic ones, squirm the most.
Let me read verses 10 and 11, and you will see why. John writes, "If anyone comes to you and doesn't bring this teaching, don't receive him into your house, and don't welcome him, for he who welcomes him participates in his evil deeds."
Yeah, that's heavy.
Okay, let's just be honest. In a 21st century culture that holds up radical inclusion, absolute tolerance, holding space for everyone, and the virtue of always hearing both sides as the highest moral goods, this sounds incredibly harsh.
It does.
It sounds bigoted, insular, and paranoid. Don't even let them in your house.
If you read that through a modern, individualistic, suburban lens, it sounds like a mandate for closed-minded cruelty.
Yeah, like John is telling you to slam the door in the face of anyone who voted differently than you.
But this is exactly where we desperately need the historical and cultural context provided by Barnes and Henry to rescue this text from catastrophic misinterpretation.
Right. Let's exercise some serious wisdom with discernment here. Let's parse the rule. First, what is this command absolutely not saying?
Barnes is wonderfully explicit here. He makes a crucial distinction. He says this verse is not an excuse to be cruel, dismissive, or unkind to your neighbors, to strangers, or to people of entirely different faiths.
Yep.
If a traveler is in need, you do not ask for their theological credentials before you offer them water.
So to use a modern example, if my neighbor, a guy who constantly posts incredibly toxic, destructive, ideological garbage online that I fundamentally oppose,
Yeah.
if he comes to my door and says, my wife is sick, I need help, or my house is on fire, I don't look at him and say, sorry, man, told the John verse 10 says I can't let you in, good luck with the fire.
Absolutely not. Barnes says in that scenario, you act exactly like the Good Samaritan. You pour oil and wine into their wounds. You treat everyone, regardless of their ideology, with honesty, kindness, and justice.
Okay, that makes sense.
You do not cut the ties of basic human empathy or familial duty just because someone holds a different opinion. To abandon a suffering neighbor would be a gross violation of the very love John has spent the whole letter defining.
Okay, that is a huge relief. But then what is the real meaning? If it isn't about basic charity, what does receiving him into your house mean to the elect lady?
We have to remember who she is. She is a prominent, wealthy woman in the late 1st century early church. In that era, there were no megachurches.
Right.
There were no church buildings at all. The entire religious movement operated out of the sprawling homes of wealthy patrons.
Like hers.
Yes. And they relied on a vast network of traveling ministers, prophets, and philosophers who moved from city to city along the Roman roads.
Because they didn't have hotels.
Exactly. These traveling teachers relied entirely on the hospitality and the financial patronage of believers like the elect lady. So receiving someone into the house wasn't just having a neighbor over for a cup of coffee to debate philosophy.
It was platforming them.
Yes. Receiving a traveling teacher into your house meant you were publicly endorsing their message to your entire local community.
Wow.
You were giving them a podium, feeding them, housing them, and likely giving them gold or silver to fund their onward journey to the next city.
What about the phrase, welcome him? Or as the older King James translation says, bid him Godspeed.
The Greek word there is charein. It is a common greeting, but in this context, it implies wishing someone joy, health, and total success in their specific enterprise.
Oh, I see.
If the elect lady stands at her door and says charein to a Gnostic false teacher, she is essentially saying, I hope your mission to spread this worldview that destroys the Incarnation is highly successful.
Wow. Okay, let's translate this to today, because this is an incredible aha moment. This text isn't about denying basic hospitality or charity. It is about ideological patronage.
Exactly.
I was thinking about how to frame this. It is the exact difference between buying a meal for a hungry person whose politics you happen to disguise,
Right.
versus taking your credit card and donating $1,000 to their toxic political campaign.
That is a brilliant modern parallel. You feed the hungry man because he bears the image of God and is a human being worthy of love. You absolutely do not fund the campaign because the campaign is an organized machine designed to spread destruction.
That is so clear.
John is looking at this wealthy woman and saying, do not use your resources, your home, your social capital, or your reputation to bankroll and legitimize people who are actively trying to destroy the foundational truth.
Because if you do, verse 11 says the quiet part out loud.
What's that?
It says that the person who welcomes the deceiver participates in his evil deeds. Matthew Henry does a deep dive on this concept of shared guilt, and it is chilling.
He lists 4 specific ways we can become partakers in someone else's destructive actions, doesn't he?
Yes, let's break down Henry's list, because it is terrifyingly relevant to the digital age. He lists culpable silence, inward approbation, private contribution, and open apology.
Let's start with culpable silence.
This is when you see the deception happening. You see the toxic ideology being spread in your workplace or your community, and you have the power or the platform to stop it or speak against it.
But you stay completely quiet to protect your own comfort.
Exactly. Your silence is a form of complicity.
Then there is inward approbation.
This is the internal alignment. You might not have the courage to spread the destructive lie yourself, but you secretly cheer for the people who do. You agree with the damage they are causing.
Number 3 is private contribution.
This is the exact modern equivalent of the dark money donation. You don't want your name associated with the toxic movement publicly, but you secretly fund it.
You buy the books, you click the links, you drive the algorithm, you provide the resources that keep the deception alive.
Yes. And finally, open apology.
This is when you publicly run defense for the deceiver. You minimize their lies. You say, well, they might be wrong on the facts, but their heart is in the right place. You excuse the inexcusable.
Henry is arguing that moral guilt isn't just about what you do with your own two hands. It is about what you facilitate, excuse, and bankroll with your resources and your influence.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
So I have a very direct question for you to reflect on right now. In your life, your business, or your social media habits, who or what are you platforming? What are you funding?
Right. Are you unwittingly bankrolling deceit?
Are you sharing a viral article, retweeting a toxic post, or donating to an organization that is fundamentally opposed to objective truth simply because you want to appear tolerant or because it aligns with your political tribe?
John is screaming across 2 millennia to tell you that true love demands a hard, unyielding boundary right there. You cannot wish success to a lie without becoming part of the lie.
It is a phenomenal challenge.
It really is. And yet, what is so beautiful about the architecture of this letter is that after laying down these incredibly intense martial boundaries,
Right, after talking about antichrists and guarding the citadel and shutting the door on deceivers,
the letter doesn't end on a note of fear or harshness. It concludes by revealing the very tender, deeply human heartbeat behind all of these rules.
it really does. We move into the final verses, and we see the immense value of face-to-face joy. Verse 12 shifts the tone completely.
It's quite a pivot.
The old man writes, "Having many things to write to you, I don't want to do so with paper and ink, but I hope to come to you and speak face to face, that our joy may be made full."
I love this verse because it brings us crashing back down to the physical humanity of the author. Albert Barnes gives us some really fascinating historical context about the materials mentioned here.
Like the paper and ink.
Yeah, when John mentions paper, we immediately think of the bleached wood pulp paper sitting in our printers. But that technology didn't exist in the 1st century Roman Empire.
Right, so what is he actually writing on?
The Greek word he uses is chartis. This specifically refers to Egyptian papyrus.
Okay, papyrus.
Papyrus was made by taking the inner pith, the membranes of the papyrus plant, slicing them into thin strips, laying them crossways over each other, and then soaking and pressing them violently together until they formed a sheet.
It was brittle, rough, and expensive.
Very. And what about the ink?
Yeah, what was the ink like?
Ancient ink was a crude mixture. It was primarily made of soot-just carbon scraped from the inside of a chimney or an oil lamp mixed with water, and then thickened with a specific species of plant gum.
Plant gum.
Yeah, to give it enough consistency so it would actually stick to the papyrus without just bleeding everywhere.
Yeah.
And he would have applied this with the kalamos, a pen made from a sharpened split reed.
I love diving into that detail because it forces us to remember the physical labor of communication in the ancient world.
It was hard work.
John is a 90-year-old man. His hands probably shake, his eyesight is likely failing, and he is sitting there, literally scratching wet soot on depressed river weeds with a sharp stick. It is laborious, exhausting work.
And he finally reaches verse 12 and just stops.
Yeah, he says, "I have so much more theology I want to tell you, so much more advice, but I'm done doing it this way." He hits the absolute limit of the medium.
Barnes notes this brilliantly. He suggests John might have felt hurried by the departure of the courier, or perhaps his frail health was failing him that day. But more profoundly, Barnes suggests John is purposefully saving the deepest, most complex, and most emotionally resonant matters for a mouth-to-mouth conversation.
Which is the literal translation of the Greek idiom for face-to-face, mouth-to-mouth.
Exactly. He wants to look her in the eye. He explicitly says he wants to do this, that our joy may be made full. He recognizes that the fullness of human joy cannot be transmitted through soot and weeds.
That is a massive comparative insight for our lives today. Think about our modern equivalents of papyrus and ink.
Text messages, emails.
Yeah, we have infinite Slack channels, we have high-definition Zoom calls, we have social media platforms where we can debate theology and politics endlessly.
We have built an entire society on the illusion that connection equals presence.
But it doesn't. We can definitely use technology to maintain a thin connection. We can use it to transmit rules, share warnings, and argue doctrine. John did exactly that with his letter. But John, sitting in the 1st century, recognizes a universal anthropological truth that we are desperately trying to ignore today. Technology can never replace the fullness of joy found in physical, face-to-face, localized human communion.
You cannot have full joy through a glowing rectangular screen. You have to be in the room, you have to hear the tone of voice, see the micro expressions, and share the physical space.
Which is a beautiful, full-circle moment for the letter. He started by defining true love as objective truth embodied in physical action, and he ends by saying that the ultimate expression of that love is physical embodied presence.
It is so rich. And then he signs off with one final familial touch in verse 13. The children of your chosen sister greet you. Amen.
Matthew Henry reflects on this, closing with a lovely phrase. He calls it familial grace.
Yes. You have these two prominent elect sisters, the recipient of the letter, and her sister, who is presumably living near John in Ephesus.
Yeah.
Both of these women are laboring to raise the next generation in the truth amidst a hostile culture. They are exchanging familial duty, encouragement, and love across the miles. It shows a beautiful, resilient network of faithful families actively supporting each other.
Which leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative thought to mull over as we close this deep dive.
Okay, let's hear it.
We spent a vast amount of time dissecting verse 10, where the elder warns fiercely against wishing Godspeed or wishing success to those who carry false, destructive doctrine.
Yes, the boundary setting.
We talked extensively about the danger of funding the bad guys and platforming deception. But I want you to think about the inverse of that command.
That is a fascinating angle. If aggressively withholding our blessing and our resources from deceivers is a moral duty, what is the corresponding duty toward those who are actually walking in truth?
Exactly. I think we get so hyper-focused on the defensive strategy, building the walls of our citadel, checking credentials, keeping the toxic influences out, that we completely forget the offensive strategy.
Right.
How often do we fail to explicitly bless, aggressively encourage, and actively financially wish Godspeed to those who are doing the back-breaking work of truth and love?
It is the other side of the hospitality coin.
Perhaps our intense, rigid boundaries against falsehood should be matched by an equally loud, enthusiastic, and literal financial patronage of the good. Find the people, the creators, the leaders, the neighbors who are actually walking in truth. Open your house to them, give them your platform, send them your resources, look them in the eye, and wish them massive, unstoppable success. Guard your citadel against the deceivers, yes, but make sure you throw the gates wide open to fund the supply lines of truth.
That is a powerful way to frame it.
That's the heart of this section. This is Wisdom for the Present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.